Good afternoon, invisible friends. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and today is July 3rd, 2025, and it's about 2 p.m. Central Time in the US. And I'm located at the 26714 Valley Side Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. Today it's a happy day. I think I got them good last night, this morning, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But for now, let me start by saying a couple of things because I want to make this video in a way that it's understandable by anybody who's just watching this video without having to have context of all the other videos. I want to say a couple of things at the beginning that apply to everything that I'm going to mention in this video, except for one thing. And when I mention that, I'll say this is not in the Form 211. But the first thing I want to mention is that all this information and the people I'm going to mention and the companies and entities I'm going to mention, I've reported them to the IRS within the whistleblower program of the IRS, which is basically a program where you can offer tips or information or referrals to the IRS when you suspect that there might have been financial crimes and tax fraud, and then hoping that the IRS investigates those issues, right? So it's an official form called Form 211, numbers 211. That's the number of the form. And this form, I filed it with the IRS, and I filed multiple of these forms through the last, I don't know, after I captured the geo index, so the last 9 months or so. But there's a big form that basically compiles most of the most important entities, and it has something like 1 million entities in it. So the entire form is 164,000 pages. Imagine that, right? That's the scale of this. And that doesn't contain all the entities. So just the entities in the US that are important. I was at the top 25 percentile, something like that, in the US. So that form, I filed it with the IRS. You can get it in multiple ways. You can get it, it's in the archive, and the link to the archive, it's on spyhell.org. You can also get it by entering in a web browser the address https form211.org, O-R-G. That domain takes you, if you enter that in a web browser, it takes you directly to the form. And also, I filed this form within the context of the divorce, this strange divorce lawsuit that Diosdado Cabello filed against me when I started researching the addresses of people in the network in Caracas. So within the context of that divorce lawsuit, I filed the entire form 211, the master form, within my exhibit list in the context of the temporary restraining order that Diosdado Cabello is seeking against me, and to order me to go to a psychiatrist and medicate me, like in the game that I proposed last week. Exactly that, the same play of that playbook. Those scenarios in the game are not entirely hypothetical. I've seen them. And the reason I filed the form, just to be clear, in the exhibit list, is because Diosdado Cabello is alleging that I'm crazy and that I'm hallucinating all these things, right? And I need to take medication. That opens the door for me to make my argument that I'm not crazy, that this is real, that I got their database. It was leaked to me by Diosdado Cabello and Vladimir Padrino Lopez indirectly. And that's how I know all these things, right? It's not delusion, it's data that they gave me. They opened by calling me crazy in a court of law. They opened the door for me to show that I'm not crazy, and therefore this should be admissible, right? So it's an unintended consequence for them. So I'm going to give you the court in this video. I'm going to mention the court, the case number, and the number of the exhibit. In case Daro Cabello succeeds at harming me, this is already filed with the court, and anybody can go and fetch it from the court. So the court is the 387th Judicial District, and the case number is 25 Delta Charlie Victor, so DCV 328122. And this is filed in the respondent's exhibit list, is the name of the filing for the temporary orders, and is the exhibit number 11 within that filing. Okay. And I'm going to post a link to the filing in the description of this video as well. So today I'm wearing my spy in training t-shirt uniform to celebrate the progress that I think I'm making. It's really exciting. To talk about that real quickly, I mentioned last week, I think that I was working on this project where I was trying to build models to estimate where they could be hiding the cars, right? Because I know they have this problem now that if they put the cars in a certain place where I'm going to drive, or I could drive nearby that place, if I record the plates, then they will have to decommission those cars, right? And they move numbers. Like when they're going to hide cars, it's not like they're going to hide 5 cars. They hide 500, 700, 1,000 cars, right? That's the volume of effort that they're using to follow me these days. So anyhow, I got the other day good cars at Veneer complex where Penelope Suarez used to live. And I had a few other candidates, right, in my list. I'm not going to say which ones they are, obviously, but so I went this morning. What I did several things. First thing is that they've been running experiments with, since I started publishing the videos on YouTube. Sorry, I should mention that. Let me show my screen real quickly to show you where are the videos of last night, this morning. It was early this morning. Yes. So this is what the call mobile looks like. And I made a small modification to it. I'm going to tell you what I did. But if you go to this channel, call-mobile raw, then click on playlists. There is this playlist that is called 2025-0703 Dockerhood Visit 2021 Fountain View, Houston, Texas. And this is that where they had that Dockerhood. And I haven't run this through the system, so take this with a grain of salt. But from what I could tell as a human, knowing how my system works, I can tell that I got them. I got them really good. There were hundreds of their cars in this place, right? Hundreds. I have no doubts. But I'll run it through the models, and so I can rank them, right? And know which are the important cars. Because right now I can tell that they're probably their cars, but I don't have really a way to really rank them systematically because I need the system to do this, right? But I can tell you, I got them really good. So in that place, they had, at least until a few hours ago, so this was like 4 a.m. this morning, maybe even 1,000 cars. I don't know, because until I run through the system all this footage, the system tells me, give me statistics, how many cars, how many positives, how many negatives, all that. But using the naked eye, I think could be probably 1,000 cars in their network, right? Like the spy cars. And the cars, most of them, I would say 99%, had real license plates. Maybe some of them could be actually traceable to actual people. The address of the complex, 2021 Fountain View Drive, Houston, Texas. Are these apartment complexes? All these that look like an H, that like have an H in the middle of the building. So these are the apartments. These are like courtyards, basically, that H. And you cannot see the cars because so the cars are under this ceiling over here, right? So it has like a parking lot outside. But I managed to scan all the vehicles in all those apartments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. More or less like 10 apartment buildings. Yeah, it could be easily 1,000 cars. It was packed. Okay. So that's why I got them really good. But again, I have to run this through the pipeline. Okay. So what I did, going back to the topic, is that I modified, because they've been running experiments, right? After I started posting the videos, they started experimenting with the tint on the windows, right? So they do things like they change the shade, they change the gray of the film, trying to make it difficult for the cameras to see the person, right? Or they put the different tones of, they're playing with the light, with the lifting inside of the vehicle. And I can see, because I see the same thing in multiple of the vehicles that are flagged in the system. So I know there's coordination in those experiments. They're trying to determine which is the combination of film, I might imagine brand, shade, I don't know, that produces the less visibility for these specific cameras, because all this depends on the cameras, on the angle that I have the cameras installed. There's a lot of factors that are fixed on my side. So they're optimizing for reducing visibility on my system. So what I did was that, and this is the thing, right? When the solution is really cheap, when you know what they're doing and how they're doing it, right? And this is relevant to something I'm going to say at the end. So what I did, I went to Walmart and I spent like $100 only in a couple of their like headlights, but like external headlights that you can, and I mounted them on the grill, on that grill that you can see on the photo, basically pointing on the same direction of the cameras. And I calibrated them first to be at a regular level that regular headlights from a vehicle would point, right? So this is just so they don't go and say that I'm blinding drivers and I'm a hazard. Like these are calibrated in exactly the same angle as regular headlights. But also I optimize them to hit the spots where they're obscuring the faces, right? So as I drive, and you can see this in the videos, it basically destroys what they're doing with the tinted window. Like even if they have a super dark tinted window, because this is 2500 lumens, it goes through, right? And then the camera can see the features of the face. And that's enough for what I need. Even if I cannot get a clear picture, the camera can see the features. The system can see the features. So that's how I destroyed those little experiments that we're doing. So I did that, and then I went this morning, like at 3 a.m. I woke up at 2 a.m. and drove to two complexes. For one, I could not get in. But this other one, I could get. It was open because of the 5 regulations they had. They cannot really close it entirely for that size. So it had these fire exits, right, open. And I used one of those, and I got in. I scanned all the vehicles in all the 10 apartment complexes. And all those are posted in this playlist that I mentioned that is called 2025-07-03 Dockerhood Visit 2021 Fountain View, Houston, Texas. Okay. And I don't know, like here you can see, right, the effect of the headlights that I'm describing, how they basically destroy that anonymity that they want to provide the agents with. So that's no more. Okay, so moving on. I want to talk about a couple of technical concepts real quickly because this is very well documented on the website and in other videos, but I want to mention them here quickly so people that are just watching this video can understand the content without having to go back and look these things up. So the first thing is the GeoIndex. The GeoIndex is a database that was leaked to me by Diosdado Cabello and Vladimir Padrino Lopez personally, indirectly, but personal, okay? And how it was leaked and everything is documented in the video, and I'm going to post the link to that video in this description underneath, okay? This GeoIndex is a database that marks places in the world, in the entire planet, with scores. It has, imagine markers. Imagine that you put pins of different colors in different places, and the colors mean something, okay? That's a good analogy. And the colors mean something like a concept or an idea, let's put it that way, and also mean a level, a number, okay? So imagine that you on each pin you have a color and a number, basically. And the color could mean a concept, an idea, and the number could mean hierarchy or importance, okay? Or volume of something. So basically they gave me that entire database and I built a system to analyze it, okay? And during that process, I realized that the database marked basically 3 things: spy locations like assets, antennas, spy houses, safe houses, things like that. Second thing is paramilitary locations. So these are locations that are used by their military or paramilitary. These are military personnel, maybe trained in another country, maybe even some of them even trained in the US, like Robert Gates, for example. He was a military official when he was Minister of Defense. And his house is marked in the index with a paramilitary score. And there's also locations where they conduct operations, military type operations. I'm going to talk more about that later. And this database also contains crypto payments. It records crypto payments that they've made, crypto positions. It's like a banking ledger for crypto, basically, for their prominent agents, like I would call them like the partners of this organization or directors and above. Like after a certain level, their positions in crypto are recorded in the database, right? So the most prominent ones. So that's the GeoIndex. I have it. I built a system to analyze it systematically using technology. And I made all these public. It's all open source and the data sets are open and published and they're available on BigQuery. You can download the data, you can analyze it yourself. And I invite anybody that watches this to really, if you have the time, try to analyze it and have a look and form your own opinion. Don't take my word for it. So that's the GeoIndex on itself. So the paramilitary scores, so this index contains numbers, okay? Some of those numbers are crypto payments and some other numbers are paramilitary scores. And those paramilitary scores basically correlate with the importance I would say from a paramilitary perspective of the asset. For example, I don't know, some point near the Lockheed Martin facilities in California have a super high paramilitary score because with those points, they use them with those houses that they have nearby. They use them to spy and intercept communications and network traffic and cell phone traffic from the people or the engineers or the directors or whatever that are working on researching military technologies, propulsion systems and rockets and things, right? Guiding systems. So that it's highly important for them. So those houses have high. And again, I'm going to post a link that has a demo that is like an hour-long demo of how I got this data, what it means. It shows examples and all that. I'm going to post that in the description of this video, okay? So now with that context, having mentioned the Form 211, and again, everything that I'm going to mention from now on, except a couple of things that I'm going to mention which they are, all of these entities first, all this is derived from that geo-index. I'm not guessing, these are not inferences, I'm not supposing anything. Like all this is derived from this database that Diosdado Cabello gave me. And he gave it to me, and you can see the video how he gave it to me, but it's all in the video. So I'm going to talk about entities that have been flagged, and I've reported them to the IRS in multiple IRS forms, notably the master IRS form, which is the one that you can access via form211.org. And that was filed with the 387th Judicial District Court, the family court where Diosdado Cabello sued me for divorce. On that, I have to make a small mention. I'm talking about the court. In the last video, I think it was, I mentioned that I saw that I had multiple options to disarm that synthetic lawsuit. And I was looking for the fastest way to do it. And I thought about it a lot. And I have a lot of options, kind of small nuclear weapons, each one on themselves. But I decided not to use them all at once, right? Because my objective is not to destroy these people. My objective is to get my son back. So I started with the simpler solution, like what I think could be the fastest way. But if they don't give me my son back, I'm going to solve them, right? So what I did, I filed a motion with the court asking respectfully, without accusing anybody or saying anything, respectfully asking the judge to recuse himself because of the fact that he did put me in the harm's way by sending me to a mediation while the other party was questioning my mental capacity, right? That's the worst thing if they're right? That's the worst thing you could do to me as a judge. So I respectfully, I'm asking for the judge to recuse himself, right? Let's see what they do. Okay, so now, with that said, I'm going to go through entities that I want to mention in this video to make it formal, official. So I mentioned my name, where I'm located, everything, right? Okay, so the first entity I'm going to mention is a Smartmatic, okay? Smartmatic is a company that does elections, voting machines, basically, technologies, right? This company is super flag. It's part of this network. It's marked in the index with paramilitary scores. All their offices in all the countries are marked. And my system could cluster the entity that represents Smartmatic with Jorge Rodriguez from Venezuela and Del Eloína Rodriguez from Venezuela as well. And the two of them are siblings. So Jorge Rodriguez and Del Eloína Rodriguez are siblings. And I know because I was born in Venezuela. And side note, it's amazing to me to see that these Venezuelans, I don't want to say that I feel proud because what they're doing is not good, but it's impressive, right? That these three Venezuelans, Diosdado Cabello, Jorge Rodriguez, and Delcy Eloína Rodriguez, they all managed to somehow get themselves entangled with these high-tech players, Elon Musk, and it's amazing. Like Venezuela during those times, 1998, 1999, was a very unsophisticated country, right? It puzzles me how they got into those circles, like what I'm trying to say. It's amazing. They obviously have a way to do that, right? But anyhow, Smartmatic is interesting because I don't know how to say this, but through all these years that I've been analyzing what they do, I see commonalities in the online attacks against Google, for example, Google queries, Google search queries, and the voting systems. And again, I see that because I spent 20 years of my life in Venezuela and I saw how they do it. I saw how they move the voters, how they change the circuits. Like they have all these series of tricks to win the elections, right? Using Smartmatic. And even if they don't win, then they change the results, right? With Smartmatic. Like it's a computer system. You can override the numbers, right? So I've seen that play out. And when I see those attacks against democracy and more basically against voting systems, I see the commonalities with the attacks of Liana Technologies against Google search queries. It's the same type of attack. I'm saying this because if authorities ever investigate these things, my suggestion, if I may give a suggestion, and I don't mean to overstep, but if I may give a suggestion, I think what if it was me investigating this, I would try to put together a team of people that know about elections and election systems in different parts of the world, and people that know about how Google search works. Because it's the same thing. It's the same type, like you can change voters by fake impressions and bots. It's interchangeable. It's the same technology. And because of that, my system co-clusters Smartmatic with Liana technology. I simulate Tursas is somehow involved in this. Looking at the thing, when you see, I don't know how to explain it, but when you see the creation, if you know the creator, you can recognize the traits. You can recognize things in the design and you can say, this probably was done by this person. That's how it feels. Like Tursa is involved in Smartmatic in some capacity. So I'm gonna keep going. The other thing I want to talk about, so it's EMRs. So EMRs is a huge topic. If I start talking about this, I could talk about this for hours because I worked for years on this, myself writing software for EMRs, okay? EMRs stands for Electronic Medical Record Systems. It's the software that your clinic or your doctor, if you're in the US or other countries that have computerized records, that your doctor would use to enter your information and to enter what you're taking, your prescriptions, all that, right? That computer software, the global type of software is called EMR. And there's different brands, different companies that do them, etc. Now, what I want to mention is there's in the US, there are a lot of regulations that try to protect data of the patients, okay, that are stored in these EMRs. And this is done by an act that is called HIPAA. I don't recall exactly what each letter means, but it's a regulation, it's a law that regulates what these companies can do with this data and what they cannot do with this data. And within this context, there is a loophole. And the loophole is that the company, they're called, I think, provider or data provider. I don't know. I don't recall exactly what is the terminology in the HIPAA law. But the companies that handle data, they can, by this act, as specified in this act, they can, if they want, sign what they call in the act a business associate agreement, a BAA, with a third-party company, kind of to form a partnership, for example. And if they do that, they are allowed by law to transfer the data to that other entity so that other entity can use the data. Okay, so this is specified in the law. And this is a loophole, and I saw this firsthand when I met a person by the name Lawson Booth, Boothe, and Hugo Diaz. And they run a company, or used to run a company called Vital Interaction. And this was the rules of this network. They basically put me in contact with this company via another website they control that is called Code Mentor. Code Mentor is a platform in which people like me that write software, I was a Google engineer at the time. So I had a profile on Code Mentor and I would freelance by the hour and I was getting good money. For my means, that was a lot of money. I was making something like, I don't know, I think $150 per hour, something like that. I could work on a weekend, for example, I don't know, 5 hours, and I could make almost $1,000, like 150 or something like that. So I was doing this on the side, basically, on the weekends. And that's how they introduced me to Lawson and Hugo from Vital Interaction. And we worked together for 2 years in this capacity, and they had me doing little projects and things like that. Some of those projects, interestingly, were for WebMD, which is a major player in all this. So the company that they had was a messaging company. So it's a company that when you go to the doctor and you make an appointment, that you get a text message saying, hey, your appointment was booked. Or then the day before the appointment, you get a reminder to make sure that you go to the appointment. And if you want to cancel it, send a message saying see, that kind of thing. So that's Vital Interaction. That's what they do. There's other companies, but one of them is Vital Interaction, and that was run by Lawson Booth and Hugo Diaz. And while working with them, I learned that, first of all, they're agents, right? Like Lawson's house is marking the index with paramilitary score in Austin, the works. But I saw what they were doing, right? So they had a team in an Arabic country. They said it was Iraq, but I think now with what I know, probably Iran, right? And so what they would do, the way it would work, right? So if the clinic would give them access to the databases, and then this team in maybe Iran would hook up to those databases and reverse engineer the schema of the databases. And then they would ingest the entire data, extract it from that database, and save that data on their own database. And knowing that they're part of this criminal network, because I have the geo index, I see this as a tremendously dangerous situation because they're extracting the medical records from these huge medical groups. We're talking, it's not a small clinics. Like Lawson had some clients that had, I don't know how many, hundreds of clinics, right? In one client. And he had almost 1,000 clients. He had direct access to the medical records of millions of people. And the way it was handled, like I was, when I saw that, the first time I saw it, coming from Google, right, where I saw how data is supposedly treated. And I say supposedly because I understand now that they also steal data from Google, right? But when I saw the way they handle it and send it overseas to these people that you never saw their face, not even when you met with them over Zoom or whatever, right? It felt like a dangerous situation to me even 8 years ago. So anyhow, I wanted to mention that it's a big risk. And the solution to this is not only to disassemble the network, like the legislation needs to be changed, right? Like this, because as I can tell from first-hand experience, they weaponize this network weaponizes the medical information. Like once they look the thing with my spine injury, they went to Venezuela to see what they could exploit, which medical weaknesses in my body they could exploit to target me to disable me, so I could not compete with eBay. Having this huge repository of medical data and the genetic data that they're getting from 23andMe and the coreblood.com and all those things, it's just, it puts all of us in a weak position where they can exploit the things that make us physically vulnerable. So that's what I thought I should mention. That on this EMR cluster, so the cluster where Lawson Booth, Hugo Diaz, Vital Interaction are, there's also a subcluster that gets union with, that is composed by entities like Clear Lake Specialties, Dr. Baba and Amar Baba, so they're brothers. Dr. Baba is the owner of the practice, okay? And so they came into play around the same time as, so there was a kind of a business disagreement with Lawson Booth. He wanted the intellectual property, that's as always, like the same thing that happened with Maxime Tarasuk years later. Lawson wanted the intellectual property of the system that I had built. I said no, and that led to a business disagreement, basically. And we stopped working together. But then what the network did was to insert Clear Lake Specialties and Dr. Baba in my life. He was posing as a client, basically to consume the technology that Lawson couldn't steal successfully, and paying a monthly fee for that service. I don't recall what the fee was. I think it was like $6,000 a month or something like that. And Dr. Baba ran that practice. And also he has, and this is interesting, he has a medical billing company, or at least that's the story that was presented to me. Maybe the company is not his, but that's what they told me. And this medical billing company is interesting because it's an aggregator, basically. It's a company that provides a service to medical practices for billing collections. And it's interesting for two things, right? One is an aggregator. It aggregates multiple practices, which is what this network loves, right? They might as well call it Clear Lake Hub, like HubSpot and GrabHub and other things. So it's an aggregator that aggregates billing data for medical practices. So they steal it in bulk. And billing data is very interesting in this space. It's even more interesting than the actual medical data. The reason is that because this billing medical data has to do with insurances. So the idea is what they were doing is that If the patient has an amount owing, like a copay or something that the insurance didn't cover, they will try to recover it from the patient. And my technology basically was doing searches to find the big opportunities, right? The same thing I'm doing right now with the Spy Health to find the biggest spies, but replace the spies by patients that owe a lot of money, okay? But the same idea, the same principle. So anyhow, it's interesting because as in everything that has to do with money, when there's money involved, companies are usually more meticulous. If it's the health of the patient, they will take the notes like by hand, or there's no standardization, is what I'm trying to say. But because insurances deal with money, they have all those conditions very neatly standardized. And this is done via what they call in this industry the ICD codes and the CPT codes, where ICD codes are standardized codes for conditions or symptoms or illnesses. So, for example, asthma has a specific number that typifies asthma, and if it's allergic asthma, has a sub number. This is it's a taxonomy of illnesses, basically very well specified. And then the same with the medical procedures; those are the CPT codes, the procedure codes. So if you get an eye exam to measure the thickness of your cornea, that procedure has a code that typifies it. So I'm saying this data is very interesting because it basically turns illnesses into structured data, which is what this network loves, to be able to standardize how to target individuals. So for them, the billing data of medical practices is more useful than the actual notes from the doctor, because this is already standardized by the insurance companies and by the, what is that they call it? Medical coders is what they call it. So this is a profession that you go to school for this, to learn how to translate from human language, illness and procedures in the medical field, to this taxonomy of ICD and CPT codes. So that manual work is already done in this database that Amar and Dr. Baba have, right? So anyhow, I saw the same thing that I saw with Lawson. Like they had that database, like they had it in a pen drive. Like it was very insecure the way they were handling it. And they're also from Arabic origins. And I don't mean to do like ethnic profiling or anything like that. Putting two and two together, I think I know where that data was going to, right? So anyhow, in that cluster, there's Dr. Baba, Clear Lake Specialties, Amar Baba, and there's also a doctor that goes by the name, I don't know if this is a real name because it's one of those funny names. His name supposedly was Rick Click. Almost they named it Right Click to make him more contextual, because at that time I was working on that post. So it was very contextual. So they named him Rick Click. And like he was posing as a prospective client. I went to his practice, or supposedly, right, to his office here in Houston. And I gave him a demo, and he told me that he had 3 or 4 successful exits in medical startups in technology and had made millions of dollars. And I don't know if any of that was true, but that's what he told me. And I remember, I don't know if this is useful or not, but I remember he had an interesting vehicle. It was an older model, but it was, I think it was a Rolls Royce, or it was a British car. I think it was a Rolls Royce. Yeah, I think it was a Rolls, but older model, like probably, I don't know, 89 or 90, like something like that. It looked old, but you could tell it was a rare vehicle. It wasn't a normal regular car that you would see on the streets. It caught my eye. It was a rarity in a way. Yeah, so they all co-cluster with Lawson Booth, and they're all part of this Piero Midyar effort of stealing medical data from American citizens and taking it to Iran. So the other thing I want to mention is, yesterday I mentioned Didi, but I forgot to mention Jeffrey Epstein. Remember the guy that had the little island? So Jeffrey Epstein's island, as you can see in this dashboard. So this house over here is the guest house, one of the guest houses in Jeffrey Epstein Island. And you can see in this dashboard that is marked in the index with a paramilitary score. And that house is even featured in a documentary that I saw on Netflix. It's the exact same house. And risking to state the obvious, the reason why they have these characters, it's not some, I mean, there's human trafficking and sex trafficking and all that, but I think it's also a factory of blackmailing. And they have this, I imagine that they would take high profile people to these places and then photograph them, record them, right? And then after that, they own that person. Otherwise, they expose them. So I imagine that's the angle, right? And of course, these people that, like Jeffrey Epstein, are the operators of that. That's their role. They're agents and other properties. Like, this is not the only property of Jeffrey Epstein that is marked in the index. He passed away in strange circumstances while imprisoned, but the properties that he owned before that, most of them are marked in the index. So that's that. Okay, so I'm going to mention some companies now. Okay, WebMD, as I mentioned before, super flagged, is marked in the index. They directly have a lot of liability because they directly participated in the attacks against my companies, and I have proof of all these things, right? Same thing with Medscape, super flagged. Another company, Netscape, and a person, it's an older man called James H. Clark. He is super flagged. Multiple of his properties are marked in the index. Definitive Healthcare, super flagged. Co-clustered with WebMD is the same thing, right? It's the same company, basically. And other tech companies, Uber, this is a Chinese company, really, but within that ecosystem, Travis Kalanick, Emil Michael, Robert Gates, the former Secretary of Defense, Shervin Pishevar, Pierre Omidyar, PayPal, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk. And I'm sorry, some of these names, I don't know exactly how to pronounce them, but they're spelled correctly in the Form 211. All of them are reported. Jeud, Karim, Keith Rabois, Max Levchin, David Sachs, Roelof Botha, Kenny Howery, Luke Nosek, Jeremy Stoppelman, Andrew McCormack, and Premal Shah. From A16Z Venture Capital Management, Mark Anderson and Ben Horowitz. From Neuralink, Siobhan Silis. From Intel, Pat Gelsinger or Helsinger. From NVIDIA, and we talked about this before, Jensen Huang. From TikTok, Shu Si Shu. The last name is Zichew. From Apple, Tim Cook. We talked about this before. From Westlake Corporation, James Chow. He's in Houston. He's a prominent family here in Houston. They're a big part of all this. From LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, also ex-PayPal. This is why they're called the PayPal Mafia, because all the PayPal early employees and founders are in this. Quora as a whole, it's a big part of the fake news machine. Gel, Russell Simmons. And Russell Simmons is interesting because he's like the city of crime. I call him that way affectionately, right? I imagine he would be like something like me, but for crime. Like, from what I can see, I can see the things that he does, and he's pretty good from a technical point of view. But he chose to devote his skills to work for Xi Jinping, basically. More companies: Workday, Carta, and WebOS. WebOS is an operative system. The operative system on itself is dangerous because it's used for espionage. From Google, Sergey Brin, one of the co-founders, and Sundar Pichai, the CEO, and Jeff Dean is the architect of many fundamental Google systems. If you think of stack, I would say, if I can pose an analogy, I would say that Russell Simmons and myself, we both use the architectures, like the stack or the infrastructure that Jeff Dean built and made public via Google Cloud. So both Russell Simmons and myself would be like users of the things that Jeff Dean invented. So Jeff Dean is higher in terms of capabilities and also in terms of danger because they're using all that to do all this. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some celebrities that are also super flag. Drake in Canada, Shaquille O'Neal, the Shaq, Paul McCartney. In fact, they used Paul McCartney, one of them at the Hamptons, and this is documented on the website. They sat me like 3 feet away from Paul McCartney to make an intellectual property claim. BJ Novak, the guy from The Office, Dr. Oz, and this is not in the file. Dr. Oz is in the IRS form. But the next one that I'm going to say is not in the IRS form because I could not find the name of the parents. I'm going to explain what this is. So this is Vlad and Nikki. This is a YouTube show that apparently is one of the most successful YouTube shows in history. It's like number 6 in revenue in YouTube. And I read somewhere that they're like, their net worth is like $800 million or something crazy like that, right? They're of Russian origin, and it's a show made for kids, okay? Beyond the, and I understand how it works. Like they boost them, and that's how they got so prominent. But the danger here really is that it's an aggregator, right? So all these kids, especially in the U.S., watch this show, and because they know the content, and what I'm gonna say, I know it because they're doing it to me right now in another context. Okay, they're trying to figure out how the clone plus relay work. So they're basically manipulating the Metallica videos that I watch when I do this, and they replace them by low-ranking Metallica videos that they own, that they know the content, so they can try to figure out where I'm putting the bytes. So I know the technique because I know that they're doing it to me, so I know what they're doing with Vlad and Nikki. So with Vlad and Nikki, the idea is if you get this show to be super successful and say that, I don't know, 50 million households in the US watch this show once a day, okay? Because you know the content, you control the content, I mean them, they know the byte stream in every single segment of the video. The moment one of those households watches or starts streaming that particular video, because they know the unencrypted version of the content of the stream of bytes, and they can capture the encrypted version with the tool they find the encryption key, the same old trick they do to everybody every time. So this Vlad and Nikki is really an aggregator, and that's why they make them so. Yes, there is a financial angle as well, because $800 million is not change, but the end goal is not really the $800 million. That's nothing to them. The end goal is to have, I don't know, 50, 60 million households in the US or in other countries that are watching this show every day, multiple times per day. So that's why it's dangerous. And there's a house related that was co-clustered by the system a long time ago with Vlad and Nikki. It's not the actual address of the show, but it's related somehow. And the address is 429 Golden Beach Drive, Golden Beach, Florida 33160. Okay. Politicians, John Whitmire and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Both are super flagged in the index. Retailers, Walmart, Target, both are super flagged, and there were incidents in which they tried to poison me with food purchased at Walmart. And this is documented in the website. Food places, Starbucks, Tim Hortons in Canada, and they also have some stores in the US, and McDonald's. Streaming services, Netflix, Spotify, and the founder of Spotify, Daniel Ek, I don't know how to pronounce it. He's super prominent in this network, like almost Travis Kalanick level, like almost at that level, right? So super flag. I would watch for him if I was the authorities investigating this. Disney Plus is also flagged in the system. Okay, so now let's talk about, sorry. Okay, now let's talk about something else. I want to change subject. Sorry, I don't know if I mentioned this, but just in case I missed him, I think I missed him. Ray Hoffman from LinkedIn also is flagged, and he's also an ex-PayPal guy, right? Okay, so now let's talk about something different. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this. In that dashboard that you're seeing in the screen, this dashboard is available if you go to spyhealth.org. Let me show you how you can get there. You can go to spyhealth.org and click on Earth, this link over here, and that will open that dashboard that I'm showing, but it will open it in an iframe here. Okay. And this dashboard is important because it has a collection of like featured places that are important for different reasons. And you can navigate them by clicking on these tabs over here. So for example, this one that says CVS, you can see all the addresses that are marked surrounding the CVS headquarters, the main headquarters in the US, where the executives and important people of CVS, the company, live. And CVS is controlled by the Iranians. So this is, and they also tried to harm me, or they tamper with my medication at CVS. So this is an important one. But there's other tabs in here that, or like when they cut the undersea cable, it's also in there. things like that. So for my next trick, I'm going to show you this. And this I'm going to enjoy. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. So this is like a smaller IRS Form 211 that I filed, okay? And I filed this, I think it was sometime like in February. I have to look at the date. But this form is specifically for ships and vessels, okay? And this is important because many of the things that they do rely on logistics. And if, for example, some of these ships were seized, they would be in a very difficult position logistics-wise because they won't be able to move anything, right? And the drugs, the illegal shipments, the evading the sanctions, all those things will probably suffer. There's a collection here, I think, of 35 entities, but some of these entities are really more than one ship, right? Like, for example, the way I reported this one, right? So the ship that my system, and all this was detected systematically, right? So these are ships that were navigating, that I'm not going to say what the algorithm is, but it's based on the geo index that Diosdado Cabello gave. This is why these entities are flagged, because they exhibited navigational patterns. I'm not going to say what the patterns are, but navigational patterns that were detected thanks to that geo index that Diosdado Cabello gave me that was designed by Elon Musk and Travis Kalanick. So for example, in line 21 of this form, I'm reporting the owners and operators of the largest ship with Marshall Islands flag, okay? And the IMO is the identifier of the ship, 9550280. This is just an example, right? But the operators or the owners of this ship own multiple ships. And if investigators investigate the owners and it turns out that they're part of the network, they could maybe seize not only this ship, but maybe others, right? I don't know about maritime law, but I imagine if the owner of multiple ships is doing something illegal, maybe multiple ships could be seized, right? So what I'm saying is there's 35 line items here, but this could be, I don't know, 100 ships or 200 ships, I don't know, right? These are the ones that my system detected. But the owners may have multiple. In fact, for example, this one, right? So this is Candy Fleet. It's a company in Louisiana that owns multiple vessels that are used to spy and to do other things. And so that's an entire fleet. It's not one vessel. Or the other example here is there's a company that does ride sharing for aircraft. Yeah, this one, Wheels Up, number 30, right? That company operates multiple aircraft. And I say I'm going to enjoy this because these ships are interesting because they're expensive for sure. But the other interesting thing is that they're hard to replace. I don't really know how long it takes to build a ship. Like these ships are like cargo ships that they use to transport. Some are like oil tankers, right? I don't know how long it takes to build an oil tanker, but I imagine it probably would be a year or more, right? So if they get seized, beyond the financial loss, is the loss of time. They won't be able to move anything for at least a year, right? So it could be a very strong punch in a way. Okay, now I'm going to switch topics and I'm going to talk about, so everything that I said before are factual things derived from the index. Okay, that nothing of that are hypotheses, suspicions, guesses, nothing like that. Those are things that are provable using that data. Now on this segment, I'm going to talk about things that I cannot prove, okay, but I have a strong suspicions based on the data again, okay? And the system that I built, Spy Hell and the pipeline. So I'm going to mention them here because I don't know, I'm not an investigator, but I imagine that's what investigators would do, right? If they think that a crime is being committed, they would hypothesize how it's being done. I imagine, right? I've never been in one of those meetings, but I imagine that's what they do. Create a hypothesis of how could this work, and then to see what they could try to gather as evidence and see if it checks out, if it works out. Hypothesizing, I think, is part of this process, right? So that's what I'm going to do in this segment. I'm going to create hypotheses. These are not accusations, or these are things that I think could work this way. I might be wrong, okay? The first thing is one I thought about regarding the gas scheme. And I've talked a couple of times about the gas scheme that they do with the gas stations, the Shell gas stations, the bookies. And every time I talk about that, I watch the video, and sometimes it happens that something comes to my mind, right? And this might be important if it turns out to be the case, because if it's the case, let me tell you what I'm thinking first, right? I remember, and I don't have access to my system here, but I remember that some time ago I was doing an experiment that was the following. I was trying to detect When I drive on these areas where the pumps are located with the cameras, right? I do this thing where I do rounds around the pumps. I do that on purpose because I've noticed a long time ago that the agents make this mistake. I think it's a mistake, right? That to make it look organic, they get out of the car and then they go to the pump, turning their back on me, right? So I don't see their faces. But the excuse is that they're going to insert their credit card in the machine at the pump, right? And this gets recorded by the cameras, the card. I think that's a mistake. So long time ago, I think 4 months ago, I was doing an experiment, but it didn't work out. Like I didn't finish it. So it's not definitive what I'm going to say. But from what the experiment was, trying to match the frames, the images, try to match that frame where the card is visible, in the cases where the card is visible, to the public images of the cards of banks in the United States. If you go to I crawled these websites, and the case of Bank of America, they publish the photo of the different credit cards offerings they have. There's a photo for each credit card. And this is public, right? So I was trying to match the card that they were using at the pump with the credit card that is on the banks publicly on their websites to see if I could see if there were clustering mechanisms there. Are groups of them using, I don't know, Bank of America credit cards or Chase credit cards? I don't know. So that was the experiment. I did not finish it because Marcelo got kidnapped and all those things, and I couldn't finish working on that. But I remember that one thing I did notice is that all of them seem to be credit cards. Like I don't think I saw ever a debit card in that set that was detected successfully. And this is just a tip for investigators. Look at this. I would look at those gas stations and look if all the payments of these agents are being made with credit cards. And the reason I say that is because remember the 3% bracket. In reality, the 3% of commission fee for the credit card processing that, PayPal, that they took control of in 1998, and they're still controlling that today. Based on what I can see on the index, that's a Chinese racket in reality, right? So what I believe could be happening, and this is a hypothesis, I have no proof, but if they're laundering the money from the drug trade of Diosdado Cabello through these pumps, and 3% of that is going to Xi Jinping, that connects the Chinese government to Diosdado Cabello and the drug trade directly, because they get 3% of every single purchase. So it would be 3%. Deduct 1% because they have to give the points to the agent, right? Which is between 0.5 and 1% for the best credit cards. So say that they get 2%, but still 2% of all the money of the drug trade. Well, I don't know what percentage of the money of the drug trade could be laundered this way. I imagine not 100%, right? Like I imagine the proceeds are higher than what they can launder with this. But more important than the volume is the connection, right? So if there is coordination in, for example, in using certain credit cards for these purchases, and let me tell you why I thought about this. There's a reason, a technical reason behind this. In the last video, I said they probably have some sort of an accounting system that allows them to see the purchase price, how much it costed, so they have to refund the agent, okay? And knowing how they operate, they would probably keep track of that money very precisely. Like they're not going to be guessing how much to give the agent. And also knowing them, they're not going to record this in a database. Because if they were prone to make that mistake, they wouldn't have created a geo-index. They created a geo-index precisely because they didn't want to record anything on a database with columns, with names, saying purchase price. And so they created this cryptic thing based on a geo-index because they thought nobody would understand. That was a mistake. But knowing all that, I doubt that this accounting system that they might be using allegedly to account for how much to refund the agents has to have certain properties. One, it has to be precise with cents precision. Secondly, it has to be such that doesn't use a database that could be subpoenaed, like the GeoIndex, right? Something like that. It's not the GeoIndex because I have the GeoIndex and I can see that there's no way they can encode all those payments in there. So what occurred to me is that they may be getting the data from the credit card transactions because they control the credit card processors. This will be trivial for them to get the transactions for this subset of agents for these transactions in this subset of gas stations that they own. Of course, this would imply collaboration from the credit card companies, and I think that would be the link to where the money is going at the end. But what occurred to me is that they may be getting the data directly from the bank. Imagine that they're using that bank for this. That specific credit card. It means that if you see coordination, right, that most of the or many of these agents are using the exact bank credit card to pay for gas and McDonald's. By the way, there seems to be an operational procedure, like not all, but most of the agents, after filling the gas, go to the McDonald's drive-through in the Shell gas stations. Like, it seems like a thing, right? It's an operational procedure. Like, you first fill the gas, and then maybe the McDonald's is doing the same thing, right? They give the meals for free to the agents, so they make the purchase, they refund them for the meal, and then the money gets inserted into the McDonald's balance sheet. But it really came from Diosdado Cabello. But the thing that I think the thing that could be important is if there's coordination with the credit cards, because that could, and then if that could be investigated and it could be proven that, in fact, they're getting that data, transaction data from the credit card company to then refund the agents, because that would be a way in which they don't have to keep a database, which is the problem that I was trying to understand how they're doing. That's why it is important to implement the same thing that they're doing, because then you understand the limitations. Like when I did the thing with the satellites, right? When I did that, I understood the technical limitations of the system, and that's important because then you can see how it works, right? The thing here, right? I tried to think, okay, how would I implement this without using a database and without using the geoindex and still having sense precision on the transactions? The solution is to get it from the credit card company or the bank, right? But because they control the credit card company since 1998, the obvious choice is the credit card processor, right? That's the aggregator for the transactions. They probably get the data from there. But if that's the case, it means that the credit card processor itself is involved in the money laundering. And that could be a direct tie to other players, right? So it could have a devastating effect if that can be proven, if that's the case, of course. So that's that. Another suspicion, and this is documented in the website, I've noticed that they seem to have certain markers in the geoindex that match to genetic markers. And interestingly, some of those marked locations fall either on, basically fall on outliers in terms of economic position. Let's put it that way. And I know the system knows economic position because of the zip code where the house is located or the area. Could be in a different country. So it seems to be extremes. It seems to be people that are very rich have these markers, and people that are very poor have these markers. And there's also, these markers are also found in some sensitive areas, like near the Tibet and near some, and it's a well-known fact that China has been accused of doing organ harvesting for years in different international bodies. It occurred to me that it's possible that they're marking in this index potential donors to match them with potential recipients. So this would mean that they're using this Hell app to coordinate, maybe, right, allegedly, organ harvesting at planet scale, to turn it into a business or a weapon. The implications of that are really dark, but I need to mention it. Okay, so next, I'm going to mention something that I did a while ago. My knowledge of this has evolved, as I mentioned before, and also my countermeasures have evolved, okay? And even my position has evolved. For example, when I captured the geoindex, the first 2 weeks after that, I couldn't leave my house because I felt they were going to harm me. And I was afraid. And if I left the house, they would harass me in a way that it was just unbearable, like psychologically, like having all these people trying to get close to me at 2 meters from me, hundreds of people in a space of 30 minutes. It was just too much psychological stress. And I would prefer to stay in the house, right? But as I started building the system, I built, like, for example, if I was driving, like, they would harass me while I was driving, right? But then I said, I can turn this data as a tool to avoid the harassment. And I built a system that basically allowed me to trace routes if I wanted to go to a place instead of, so when you use Google Maps, it optimizes for the travel time, for example, or for distance, okay? And it gives you a route. So I did something like that, but it would optimize for avoiding harassment. Basically, route me through places where they don't have strong positions. So I tested this myself, and it works very well. Like I could drive better, like more relaxed in a way. And this is why I'm saying that my position changed, because now, as you can see, last night, I went to their house, right? Myself, I went to their nest in a way, right? And I recorded all the cars, because now the thing has switched. Now I have the technology to know where they are, and I'm going to record them all and report them all. But at the beginning, it was the opposite. They were hunting me. So I was my drives in a way to minimize the possibility of encountering a hunter. Let's put it that way. And it worked very well. Okay. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I'm gonna say something that might be, and I don't mean it to be inflammatory or anything, but it's something that I really see and believe, right? So I'll share it. So as I was doing this, I think maybe late December, I started noticing things systematically through the uses of technology. And I don't want to give much details because this could be sensitive, but I think my belief is that this health app is used by Russia to coordinate military personnel and equipment, tanks and troops to attack Ukraine. I see it in the index and using systematic means. And I'm mentioning it because I believe that defensive positions in the border between Ukraine and Russia, the defensive positions of Russia, are marked in the index. And it occurred, I'm not a strategist or anything. I don't know how these things work, but for me, it worked, is what I'm saying. It helped me defend myself against them when they were harassing me on the streets in Houston. And the same technique could be used to navigate the terrain in a way that minimizes their chances of success, either when they're defending or when they're attacking. So that data is in a dashboard, and it's here, like in the same dashboard where Jeffrey Epstein is. If you scroll to the right, you're going to see one that says Eurasia. I think that's I call it. I call it that way because I didn't want to make it obvious that it was. Of course, they know that I know. And that's another reason why they want to harm me. So this one, Eurasia, right? So if you click on that, I have it open already. I don't know. Yes. It basically has multiple countries that border Russia. But if you zoom in, and you will see the distribution, right? This is a heat map, right? You can see how the points are distributed. And I don't think this has the roads overlay. Let me see if it has it. But if you overlaid it with the roads, like you can see, like they're basically marked positions in various strategic roads that lead to Ukraine. And also they did the same with roads that lead to Moscow. So anyhow, I don't have the reach to forward this to anybody in Ukraine. I don't know anybody in Ukraine. No. But if anybody ever watches this video and has followers that are Ukrainian or know anybody, or I don't know, consider forwarding this information because it could help them, right? It could help them diffuse this war. It could save lives. And I wish I had a way to send this over, but I tried. Like I created a video some time ago and posted it, but I don't have reach. Like I don't have followers. It goes nowhere. So if anybody watches this, please consider sharing this with somebody that could use it. And again, all this data is open source, is in BigQuery. If you want to get it from BigQuery, let me show you real quickly how to do it. You can go to Key Opinion Leaders, and I'm going to post this link in the description, keyopinionleaders.com/open-datasets. If you click on that, if you open that, there's a lot of data sets that I've published by country. There's a data set for Canada, for Mexico, for the high seas, marking the points that they are watching or they're using to communicate. Because that's the other thing, right? They use this, my theory is that they use this to coordinate troops in that conflict, but also to mark locations that have routing capabilities for networking, right? If you disable their network, also they won't be able to coordinate the troops. And that will also disarm the conflict, diffuse the conflict. If they can't attack, then there will be no conflict. I'm saying this in that context. I'm not saying attack Russia. I'm saying diffuse the conflict, the opposite. Right? The objective is to save lives, not to not to cause more losses of more lives without need. So with that, I'm going to close this session today, and I really hope that this information goes to the right places. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.